Welcome back to the Skid Factory. Before we begin this episode, we're going to announce the winners of our Tool Pro OBD2 reader. Hopefully both of these people own a Volkswagen. The first winner is Redo Man. That's his name on the YouTube, so I don't know your real name. So you've got to contact us via sales at the Skid Factory to redeem your prize. Redo Man's suggestion was 18 volt Tool Pro drills to power the mower, which seems on point. So go and get yourself a Volkswagen. Second winner was Nathan Single, who is a motorbike fan, as we are, and his suggestion was a Husselberg 70 degree 570cc engine, which I like because it's a sick engine and it's unique. So you get one as well. So head out and maybe you can buy a Skoda.
Why are you writing off the Vag group though?
Because the engine lights are always on.
Is that the meme? What if you got a Pajero?
Memes usually come from based on fact. So sales at the Skid Factory to redeem your prize, people. We're about to head off down to the dyno to strap the VL on, or bolt it on as it were. There was a couple of things we had to do beforehand. Kai said we needed to switch it over to E85 because at the compression ratio the engine's running, and with nitrous oxide it's far too volatile. If there is a ping moment or anything like that, it's going to be end in tragedy. So we've replaced the injectors that we just put in with some Raceworks 1200cc injectors, and the fuel pump's been replaced with a Purged unit from Racebergs. So we're going to load her up on the trailer, take it down and get stuck into it and see what it can do.
So we got the VL on the dyno today, and we have gone through, put some settings in the ECU. We've started to go through and just lean on it a little bit, see what it wants to do. Everything going well. We moved away from some of the steady state tuning into some of the ramp runs, and on the very first ramp run, we have run into, at high RPM, it sounded like the car bumped into a rev limiter. Now we've gone thoroughly back over the log and actually discovered there was no rev limiter active, and then obviously for me that's always an alarm bell, because it definitely sounded like a rev limiter, and if it wasn't, then we definitely have something going on. And in an instance like this with a relatively highly stressed naturally aspirated combination, I would say the most likely thing will be we have a little bit of valve float, which can happen, especially this combination hasn't done a huge amount of Ks, but it has been together for a little while, and sometimes that can happen as sitting with the rocker on peak lift on a particular cylinder. What will happen is it sort of just like crushes the life out of the valve spring. It just sits there at peak lift on there, and then what happens is then when you start running the car again, that spring has lost its tension. So I suspect that's what's happened. It does need to be investigated. It needs to have rock covers off, and you go through and check valve spring tension and just check all the valve springs to see what's going on. But we don't really want to try to see what that was again, because I feel like we dodged a bullet there, because the valve float in a combination like this, if you're unlucky, it can result in the valve actually clipping the piston, which just generally very quickly results in destruction. So we can probably show you some of the graphs to show what we saw, but there's a few other sort of telltale signs as well in the data log and stuff like that, that's what we're experiencing.
So where we go from here, Kai? Back to the mechanical shop?
From here, we're not going to fix the valve springs on the keyboard. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get our hands dirty and get the rocker covers off and have a look.
All right. That sounds like a mint job for Shayne, I reckon. Alright, well that's what the dyno's for. We're here to test, and it's a safe spot to do it. If we had done this on the street, probably would have ended up with bits of engine everywhere, so
Yeah,
all good.
absolutely.
Load her up on the trailer and
Yep. Load her up on the trailer, have a look at that valve train, and let's live to fight another day.
make a date for later on.
Correct.
Awesome. Thanks, Guy.
No worries.
The VL is back. Shayne has replaced all the valve springs with better ones. So we've got one more thing to do before we head back to the dyno, and that is to put a crank trigger on it, which consists of this 36-1. It's a sort of a blank wheel that we'll have to obviously cut up and make fit. We've got a GT101 ball sensor, and that's a universal bracket for that sensor, so that's all from Raceworks. We'll pull the bottom pulley off and try and figure out how to do it. Spent a couple of hours on the lathe turning this trigger wheel. It's basically like a blank, I suppose you'd call it, where you just machine it to suit your application. So we basically just took the whole center out of it. I turned this down so it was true. I turned that down first, then put it into the lathe the opposite way. Then I made a small step in this side, so when we put this on, it would be like true as far as wobbling. I made it so you would have to press it on and then put the pulley in the freezer, and then heated the ring, and it basically just fell on there, cooled down, it's clamped, but we've also added just 4 TIG spots on there just to make sure it doesn't turn. If that were to go out of sync with the engine, it can be catastrophic. The only thing is, it's obviously got it can be bolt on 4 different ways, so whoever's pulling it apart needs to be aware of that make sure it goes on the right way, otherwise it probably just won't start. So that's all done. The pickup for it, or the GT101 sensor, so this is a Hall effect sensor. You provide it with power and it outputs a ground signal, same sort of thing as what's in the back of it inside that distributor. So I can just patch into the wiring that's already there. I've used an old alternator bracket, so it's got a curve in it, which allowed me to sort of push the sensor down to a spot where there's no bolt holes. I've just sort of, welded stuff up and made it work. This should work really well. I'm about to bolt it all on, then I'll wire this up, and we'll have to go through a syncing process. So I might actually just wire it up, and because I don't have anyone else here with me because it's Sunday, we've got a dyno date tomorrow, so I've got a spot with Kai, so I've got to get it done. I'll probably just get the deal the syncing stuff when it gets to Kai's place. So I'll just make it so it's a little patch harness, so we can just leave it as it is now. It runs, and then just plug the patch in and then sync it up at the dyno. Got the VL plugged back into the dyno, ready to have another go. But first of all, we've got to set up the trigger on the crank sensor. So Kai's just rotating the engine around, identifying where the first tooth is, and that's how we're going to sort of figure out what sort of numbers to put in the ECU. Probably best off to get Kai to explain it, because he did a really good job of telling us just then.
Telling us the way we're doing it's wrong. Well, not wrong.
We're doing it the hard way.
Yes, so what we've gone is we've moved to, instead of having the distributor using the RPM for position, which we saw last time had quite a bit of timing scatter, Al has gone to a crank trigger, which is vastly superior. And then what we're looking at is that the Haltech wants to know what's called the offset angle. And what that actually is on this, where we're a missing tooth trigger on the front, is it wants to know the position in crankshaft degrees of the first tooth. So when that first tooth lines up with the sensor, it wants to know what is that angle. And then that's how it determines the engine position and speed. Yep. Yep. Alright, so we're pretty close there, so we're just going to fire the engine up now, and then we'll just check it with it running to adjust any TDC offset if required. It's crazy how much, did you ever see how much the timing was scattering before? No?
No, you put a lot of numbers in there. Is it not doing it now?
Like when you go to a crank trigger, it's like, it's just like so much better. Like, yeah.
We've dialed in the new crank sensor and checked it with revving it up to about 4,000 RPM, and there's no timing drift anymore, which is why we use a crank sensor. Just to give you guys a look at what was going on, we actually reverted it back to distributor only and got some shots of that. You can see that the timing is moving around, and that is just a mechanical problem. It's the mesh of the distributor and the camshaft gears, and you can't do anything about it in the software. So that's why we really needed to change it over, because that 1 or 2 degrees could be critical when you're running nitrous particularly, but just in general it's not ideal. That's why most, or just about every engine now uses a crank mounted sensor.
So in standard form guides, you'd say it's perfectly okay. No?
Yeah, in a naturally aspirated application, it's if we've got, and this one I think honestly was true, is probably closer to about 5 degrees of drift is what we were seeing. Not like 1 or 2 I wouldn't be too concerned about, but this was probably closer to 5 to 7. And then in that case, especially when we're running nitrous, it's one of those things, or any forced induction for that matter, we want the timing to be exactly where we tell it to be. We don't want to be moving around by itself. Alrighty, so we've just done the first run with the new valve springs, and it's gone straight past where it was last time, falling off, gone out to about 7,200, and after about 7,000 we are still seeing a drop in power, and if you could hear it, you could hear a little bit of sort of like last time, so we're thinking that's where the valve train's sort of becoming unstable again. It has, the new springs have got us about another, so it's about 500 to 600 RPM further in the rev range, but we're going to just have to end the runs a little earlier because unfortunately the car is still climbing in power before it starts to float the valves over here. So it's one of those things that unfortunately we're going to have to pull the revs up, the run up a little earlier. We've chatted to the engine builder and he's happy for us to do that.
Righto. And when does the nitrous come into play? Can we still do that with this issue, or?
We can, yep. We just will have to set it up so that essentially the nitrous is definitely not, we do not want nitrous in the engine with valve float. It will end spectacularly in all the wrong ways.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll just have to be careful with it, and we'll have it come in a little lower than that.
Awesome.
An acceptable gain.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, over like you can always think of it as percentage-wise. We just picked up 13 horsepower, more or less, from 2 degrees, and yeah, on a little small block, just make it 350. So yeah, that's not a bad gain.
That's 30.
That's 30 there now, so that's 30 even. Yeah, and it's holding steady there. Everything looks good there. We'll give it an eye. It looks like 30 is going to be the number. We can start experimenting with some nitrous.
Shayne and I have just pulled out the 6 plugs and replaced them with a set of 8s in preparation for running some nitrous through the engine. We've kind of done with the NA tune. It sounds healthy enough, and it's time to move on to trying to blow it up with nitrous. Joking, I'm joking, Shayne. What have you been up to in that computer there, Kai?
Yeah, so I've just...
a bit going on there?
Yeah, a bit going on. So I've set up so we're doing a dry shot with the plate system at the moment. So the nitrous is coming in through the plate. The fuel is going to be added by the injectors. So the Haltech is in control of that. This is definitely the preferred method because it allows us to individually tune cylinders and stuff like that. That's how any modern system should be done. So I've just gone through and set up all the enabler. We're enabling it off the CAN keypad. Then I've set up some activation conditions for RPM and throttle position, all that sort of stuff. One of the big things with nitrous is you definitely don't want to spray it too low in the revs. It's really good at removing your intake manifold. So we will make sure it's... we're going to start spraying at about 5400, which is just after the converter couples. So that should sound... I'm sure you'll hear it when it sprays. It should stand up quite significantly, I would say.
So what's the reason for the change of the heat plug? Just explain that for me.
It literally just comes down to the plug, the temperature of a plug, or the heat range of a plug is designed for the temperature and pressure inside the cylinder. So when we're running naturally aspirated, we've got one amount of pressure and temperature in the cylinder, which we're running a plug specific for that. Now we're going to add about 150 shot is what we're doing. So we need a cooler plug to be able to cope with that extra pressure and temperature in the cylinder.
Perfect, thanks mate.
So first things first, whenever we do a nitrous car, or I might be a little pedantic with it, but I like to set up the ignition retard and the fueling addition from the ECU, and then I like to do like a dummy run, so to speak, with the bottle off. And so what that does is we go to do a pull on the dyno, and then we'll see the ECU wind back the ignition timing and add a heap of fuel to it, which is just going to kill the power and naturally aspirated, but it's not going to do anything. Then we know that it's pulling timing and it's adding fuel how it's supposed to, and all we got to do is turn the bottle on. That's pulling 6 out and it's fat.
That's got the 100 jet in it.
Oh, does it? Oh, that's why it's fat then. I thought it was 150.
That's 100 in it.
Ah, okay, cool. That makes sense. Yeah. You want to spray 150 into it?
We can change it if you want.
Well, I mean,
You reckon safe enough?
it's fine. It looks fine. Yeah. Yeah.
They're all in there, I think.
Yeah. Put 150 jet in it. Yeah, so we've just sprayed it, and yeah, nitrous has done what nitrous does. It makes lots of extra power. But I thought we'd all said 150 shot, and I didn't realise it's actually still only got 100 jet in it. So it was just conservatively pulling ignition timing and adding more fuel than we really needed. Yeah. So, because yeah, we sort of all, yeah, it's one of those things, but we did discuss about starting on 100, but I forgot I just had 150 in my head, and yeah, but anyway, like I said, that's happy there. So we've pulled the plug, it looks super safe, as we'd expect, and so now we're going to put the 150 jet in because everything looks gorgeous. So let's see what it does.
Is this where you get the drill out to increase the size? Is that off spec, industry standard, Alan?
5mm drill bit all the way.
So Kyle, when you're talking about a shot of nitrous, that's what you're referring to as the jet size?
Correct, yeah,
and
the jet size.
It's obviously releasing a certain amount of nitrous into the inlet manifold.
Correct, yeah, yep. So nitrous pressure, bottle pressure is on one side of this jet, and that's restricting how much can flow into the engine.
And can you just explain to me too why you purged, like before the run you gave it a little purge too? What's the go with that?
Honestly, on the dyno, it's not that critical, but it is just getting the nitrous, liquid nitrous, all the way up to the valve, so that when the nitrous shot hits, it's going to be. I want to simulate it how it would be at the drags. You know what I mean? So because you would purge before running the drags.
And when you see a big nitrous hitter at the drags and they purge for like 30 seconds, what's the go there?
I mean, some of it is showmanship, but some of it can also be trying to get the bottle pressure to a consistent amount. They may have their tune-up figured out for a certain bottle pressure. Purging the pressure cools the bottle, lowers the pressure to get that consistency.
Righto, cool. Thanks, man. You sure they had the right number on it, Shayne, or was that...
Pretty sure.
Was it a 64 or a 90? Hang on, 4 doesn't go upside down.
No.
As long as we physically...
46, but he keeps it clean.
I could hear it come on that time.
That's your converter being very, very, very loose. Go for the money shot, I reckon.
Money shot.
Yeah.
Of more nitrous.
No, we'll pull the air cleaner off. It's a really small air cleaner. I wouldn't be surprised if it picks up a bit.
That's it for the VL's run on the dyno. It's working well. Shayne is super keen to get in the car and go for a drive. He hasn't driven it for quite a while. So we had some problems at the initial dyno, uncovered some basically mechanical issues, which is also a possibility. It's not always about fuel and ignition. Sometimes it's just things that aren't working properly mechanically in the engine. Got that sorted, fixed that crank angle sensor issue, so we've got a nice stable spark now, and added a bit of nitrous. What do you think, Kai?
I think it's a really cool combination. I was saying to Woody before, it's nice to have something a bit different than just the typical turbo LS. So yeah, a nitrous Holden with 308 headed too. Yeah, super cool. I love it. And yeah, stout power. I'm sure it'll be a blast on the street.
Yeah.
What was that final power figure without the air filter? It was only a few more, wasn't it?
The air filter didn't actually make any difference to speak of. So
It was negligible, yeah. But
basically just testing to make sure it isn't a restriction. So
yeah, it put down 471 at the hubs, which I think is a pretty stout number for a Holden-headed small block. Yeah, it's not bad.
And I guess the true test is at the track, right? Because
Absolutely. You don't race dynos.
that's it. So hopefully we can get down the track and give
Yeah,
you an
that'll
update. Big thanks to Shayne for entrusting us with this, what is a very unique and valuable vehicle, and we're happy to have been able to do what we've done, which in our eyes and in Shayne's, we're improving on a car rather than changing it completely. It is a special model, and some people did get cranky about us doing anything to it in the first place, but at the end of the day, as Shayne said, it's my car, so I don't care. So
Shayne said one of two with a 400.
yeah. So,
How cool's that?
pretty unique.
Rarer than a director, is it not?
I don't know. I don't know about that. We'll have to ask Brocky
They have to ask the comment section.
to get a Ouija board out and ask Brocky. That's enough of that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
super soft.